Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the service of Barbara K. Levin. Rabbi Adam Shalom will be officiating. We welcome those of you who are joining us via live stream, and for those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure that your cellular phones have been turned off. At this time, the rabbi is going to approach Mr. Levin to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya, of tearing of the ribbon.
Bonjour et bienvenue. Good day and welcome. I wasn't going to do the whole thing in French. Welcome to those joining us from around the world. Very appropriate as a tribute to someone who loved the entire world and seeing every corner. That world out there, beyond this space, is a little bit less beautiful in January 2026 than it was 1 year ago. The sunset can still be breathtaking. Music can still uplift us and inspire. Art can still capture the human condition. But a world without Barbara Levin in it, for those who knew her, for those whose lives she touched, for them the world seems a little dimmer, less vibrant, certainly less kind. Barbara's appreciation for beauty was her profession and her passion. Her special gift to the world and to her friends was her kindness, her intelligence, her modesty about her talents, and her use of those gifts to bring beauty to the world. After all, we call a kind gesture a beautiful act. The curtain has fallen on Barbara's beautiful acts, and we who are here to remember, or we who are here to support those who remember her, we, all of us, are the better for what she accomplished while the stage was hers. I'd like to begin this celebration of Barbara's life with a poem that speaks about memory and legacy and kindness and beauty. It's not in your booklets. It should be in your minds. It is entitled My Hereafter by Juanita DeLong. Do not come when I am dead to sit beside a low green mound, or bring the first gay daffodils because I love you so. For I shall not be there. You cannot find me there. I will look up at you from the eyes of little children. I will bend to meet you in the swaying boughs of bud-thrilled trees, and caress you with the passionate sweep of storm-filled winds. I will give you strength in your upward tread of everlasting hills. I will cool your tired body in the flow of the limpid river. I will warm your work-glorified hands through the glow of winter fire. I will soothe you into forgetfulness to the drop, drop of the rain on the roof. I will speak to you out of the rhymes of the masters. I will dance with you in the lilt of the violin and make your heart leap with the bursting cadence of the organ. I will flood your soul with flaming radiance of the sunrise and bring you peace in the tender rose and gold of the after sunset. All these have made me happy. They are part of me. I shall become part of them. I did not personally have the pleasure of knowing Barbara. I spoke with Chuck, and he has shared with me some of the messages that he has received from people who were important to them. We shall be hearing later from their close friend, Kelly Johnson, and from Chuck himself. No one knew her better than Chuck, or she him. So my task today is to sketch the outline, the major features and moments of Barbara's life and work, and they who knew her well will add the color and the shading to make it that much more real and vibrant. I will say that my understanding is that Barbara did not want to be the center of attention. to have everyone focus on her. She did not want to be complimented or praised for her talents. In other words, she might have been very uncomfortable with what we're doing today, talking about her so much and so glowingly. Well, Barbara, too bad. We need to remember you, and by all the accounts I've heard, you were great. One of the pleasures of appreciating art is approaching it from many perspectives. The same statue looks different at a new angle. The lighting and the frame influence how we perceive a painting. Barbara and art are a pair. As someone who loved art, she was able to do for work what she did for pleasure. So perhaps we can appreciate Barbara's beautiful life better if we consider it from different angles. The first angle, from a distance. Barbara Serwer was born in April 1947 in Detroit, Michigan, when the auto industry was king and Detroit was the 5th largest city in the entire country. She grew up near 7 Mile in Livernois, attending Mumford High School, where my mother also went, coincidentally. Her family was relatively well off. Her father ran a restaurant and hardware supply business that he had inherited from his father. He was a hard worker, working 6 days a week. Barbara's grandparents were immigrants, and her mother's father, Jacob Boren, had many siblings, so she grew up with many, many cousins. Jacob had run an ice business in the day of ice boxes before refrigerators, and he was able to flip that into real estate development. So the family was generally comfortable, and Barbara was a smart and successful student through high school. She briefly attended Sunday school at a Reformed temple, but Barbara decided she'd prefer to spend that time visiting a friend's house instead of going to Sunday school. And then she would come home and sneak the absence notices from the temple out of the family mailbox before her parents would see them. Now, in the big picture, Barbara always felt part of the Jewish people, even if she was not particularly religious. Barbara's grandfather, Jacob, died when Barbara was only 13, but she and her cousins had a wonderful relationship with his widow, Claudia, who was a cultured immigrant and Holocaust refugee from Vienna via Denmark. There were particularly vivid memories of Claudia bringing Barbara and her cousin Lydia on a 2.5-month trip through Europe. This began a lifelong love affair with art and culture, museums, and travel, all key parts of the woman Barbara was becoming. While there were challenges in her family relationships, there were also cousins and lifetime friends who stayed with her and in her life all those years. A second angle, as we draw a bit closer, her profession. When it was time for college, like the smartest people from Detroit, Barbara attended the University of Michigan, where she took an art history class that set her on her path. She earned her BA in art history, taught briefly, and then pursued a master's degree in library science from Dominican University in the Chicago area, followed by another master's in history of art from Northwestern. Now, how do you find a job that combines all those degrees? Barbara went to the Chicago Public Library, and she handled all of their art book ordering for the next 4 years. She also worked as a research librarian at the Art Institute of Chicago, but as she grew in knowledge and confidence, she decided she wanted a more independent career. After a few years as an assistant to an art appraiser, she was able to start her own business, which eventually became Barbara K. Levin Fine Art Associates. Barbara initially specialized in paintings, prints, and sculptures, and worked for many important companies, including consulting with several banks and, for a time, managing the Abbott Lab art collection. As an art appraiser and as a private dealer, that just gave her many more reasons to return to Europe regularly, both for business and for pleasure. A third angle, as we draw even closer to the artwork, her loving relationship with Chuck. While getting her master's in art history, she and Chuck were both living in Carl Sandburg Village. I'll let Chuck tell the story of their meeting and whirlwind romance, married quickly at age 28 in 1975 and together as inseparable life partners for 50 years. They knew what they needed to know about each other and their partnership very quickly and very deeply. They put each other first They knew how important work was to each of them, and they lived a beautiful life together. As Chuck put it to me, if they were together, it was enough. A fourth angle as we tour around the work of art: Barbara's love of the wider world. Chuck and Barbara together saw most of the world. They sailed on the Ganges River in India, they visited Egypt and Israel, they sampled the world, and they always met interesting people along the way who sometimes became good friends. They saw 70 countries and every continent except Antarctica. After all, there are no art museums, or architecture, or archaeology to see in Antarctica. But they saw those just about everywhere else. Their favorite place, where over a decade ago she and Chuck began to spend half the year, was Paris. She started learning French in high school, and Chuck told me over the years she became rather fluent, both in speaking and in comprehension, though she always spoke with an American accent. They would see art exhibitions, new museums or museum reopenings, and fashion exhibitions. Barbara's love and talent for beauty included fashion, clothing and jewelry, and in Parisian style, she often wore a scarf for color. Another angle that became clear as we get even closer to the art: her personality. Barbara was not just a great partner to Chuck, she was a great friend to many, from people she knew from childhood through her whole life, collecting friends and giving friendship, a different kind of fine art of living. How did she do it? Chuck told me that what made her a great friend was her kindness and her caring about other people's feelings. She was very smart and very knowledgeable, but she never showed an ego about it, and she did not think she was as beautiful inside and out as she actually was, an irony given her career of spotting and sharing beauty everywhere else. There were few people cuter or smarter or better dressed or more worldly or well-traveled than she was in any room she was in. And yet, she rarely talked about herself, and she did not like giving speeches. In fact, someone who did talk a lot about themselves would bore her. We'll hear more about her capacity for friendship from their close friend Kelly in a few minutes. One final detail you have not heard about yet is Barbara's illness in the last year. And that was by design. Barbara was an intensely private person, and she did not want to burden other people with her troubles. Sharing her problems would make other people upset, and that would make her feel bad. So if you didn't know that she was ill, there was a kind reason behind that choice. Barbara did what she had to do through her treatments, though the January diagnosis of metastasized and incurable colon cancer came out of the blue as a terrible shock to both of them. She and Chuck faced many difficult days and nights together at home and in the hospital, grieving many small losses along the way, including not being able to go back to Paris one more time. Chuck was her devoted caregiver, finding meaning in the smallest things he could do to help in any way. And I'm sure that all of their friends know and appreciate how much he did for her, even if they didn't know she was ill until the end. This is a work of art, appreciated from many perspectives. And each of you who knew her saw her from your own angle, with your own experience and background in a different light, and could appreciate what was beautiful and wonderful about her in your interactions with her through your life. Part of the tragedy is knowing that as time goes on, she will not be a part of our lives. We will not have that element of beauty and kindness and caring to connect with. And yet we will know in the passage of time that her memory will come to our minds. She is gone in a physical sense, but she is part of our lives as we remember her. And so in your service booklet, you'll find a poem on the inside panel entitled, "We Remember Her." And I ask you to respond to each of the main lines in the poem together with the italicized text with the words, "We remember her." In the rising of the sun and in its going down, together, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of the buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember her. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, Barbara too shall live, for she is now a part of us, as together we remember her. Barbara lived a beautiful life and had many loves: art and fashion, architecture and archaeology, travel, Paris and French, her close friends and family, and of course, her Chuck. Even though her death came sooner than it should have, there is a French phrase that has made its way into English you may have heard before: joie de vivre, the joy of living, living through your joy. And that is how we should remember her: living, vibrant, brilliant, kind, and en français, and in French. We've chosen a short piece of music by the famous French singer Edith Piaf. It is entitled Non, je ne regrette rien. I regret nothing. I have no regrets. You have the translations of the lyrics inside your service booklet, and we will hear this music to hear both the beautiful voice, but also the strength of character that come behind these lyrics.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. C'est payé, balayé, oublié. Je me fous du passé. Avec mes souvenirs, j'ai allumé le feu. Mes chagrins, mes plaisirs, je n'ai plus besoin de balayer les amours avec leur trémolo, balayer pour toujours. Je repars à zéro. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Car ma vie, car mes joies, aujourd'hui, ça commence avec toi.
And now, some words in memory and caring from Chuck and Barbara's close friend, Kelly Johnson, and then from Chuck himself. Chuck first?
Let's see here. I have to speak into this, I'm told. As I told the rabbi, I wasn't sure that I could give this speech, and I'm not sure that I can get through it, but I wanted to try. It was because Barbara's so special, because our relationship was. I will try. We'll see how far I get. And I actually wrote out the speech, which I rarely did in my years of giving a lot of speeches at lawyerly events, but also because somebody could pick it up if I couldn't finish it. So I'm going to do more reading than I would normally do. A little over 50 years ago, I went out on a first date with Barbara. We both fell in love that night, although she later said that she fell in love during our first phone call 2 days later, because, you know, why not? And but I told her I fell in love on Thanksgiving the prior year when we were there with the sister and brother and never talked to each other, just people we were dating. Our second date was 3 days later, and on our second date, we started talking about what if we were together. And on our third date, I went to her apartment in Sandburg, and we decided we were together, that we would not be apart for the rest of our lives. I don't know how we knew, but we did, and we were. Within 3 weeks of our first date, we were engaged. We were married in less than 3 months after the first date. Some people, friends of ours, asked things like, do you really know each other? Things like that. And we still had to ask each other things like, do you take cream in your coffee and things. We didn't have a lot of knowledge, but we knew, and we were right, as it turned out. What did I love about Barbara? Well, what was there not to love? She was beautiful, intelligent, kind, very supportive. I never could have gotten through a long adversarial career without her being there. She was loving, she was loyal. When we first started talking about getting married, I expressed doubt about whether I was capable of taking care of her, and her reply was that we would take care of each other, and we did. She always told me that when she was angry at me for something, that she, and she had reasons too. Okay. Nobody was more stubborn than I was, except maybe her. That she could not stay angry for more than a few minutes because it hurt her too much. When one of us was in mental or physical pain, it felt like it was the other's pain. It was, there was no separation. Barbara was also highly loyal to her friends, and that included, as the rabbi said, a range of people. Old friends that she went to grade school with, and who she also went to high school and college with. They stayed together, like Mary Grossman Serlin, who was her kindergarten friend and her unpaid therapist. Linda Reisman Goodsmith, who was her consultant on how to find a husband that was a good match, and for the right reasons. And Linda Ahrens Kidness, who she felt simply was the sweetest person she knew. She also loved her big sister, cousin Wendy, who's here, her cousin Linda in Los Angeles, who was her travel partner in Europe when they were 16 with Grandma Claudia. And she loved Grandma Claudia, who stayed with us well into her 90s, who she traveled with as a child and teen, and who assured her that she would like Europe even better than Florida. She visited Grandma Claudia with me when we were married, And we were considered the same. The spouses of her grandchildren were her grandchildren, and it was sort of a lifelong love that they had. Her love and loyalty also were extended to our special North Carolina and Florida friends who were here, Kelly and Renee Johnson, Neil and Mindy Ezel, who started as my clients and became our family. In addition, she loved and was loyal to many neighbors in Chicago. God bless, a lot are here. And she had friends all over the United States and all over the world, some of whom I think will be watching, including people we met or kept up with on our travels in Switzerland, in France, in Berlin, in Australia, when we were fortunate enough to meet nice people on trips. And they weren't always, I gotta say. If we were lucky enough to be going to where they lived or going somewhere where we could meet them again, we went out of our way to try to do that so that we cemented relationships. And we have some very close relationships. Many thanks to the friends who honored Barbara by flying in for the service, Kelly and Renee, Mindy and Neil, cousin Wendy, Ann Peterson from DC, who's going to live the Paris adventure because she ran into the right people on a trip who convinced her. And to those who are joining by live stream from many U.S. and foreign cities. The reason that so many people were drawn to Barbara, I think, were the same reasons that I loved her. She was kind in the most pure way. She abhorred prejudice, cruelty, and self-importance in the world, and there sure is a lot of it, isn't there? She worked consciously to make other people feel comfortable with what she said and what she did. And there were many times when we'd come home from a night out and she would say, "You shouldn't have said that. You know, they didn't, that wasn't. She didn't have standards for me in performance. She thought I could do anything. But she was unhappy if I didn't say the right things to other people. It was very important to her. She was never phony. She never bragged. She never tried to be the center of attention. I'm sure that a lot of people here, some people listening to the rabbi, would have no idea about some of the things that she did or accomplished. She even represented the IRS, your government, and forced a well-known Chicagoan to settle a case when he was taking his so-called foundation art and putting it in his home for fun. She came up with a value that the IRS was going to charge to him and accomplished that. She was extremely talented in what she did, and she knew everything about everything in art. She also was intensely private, as the rabbi said. She didn't want to burden other people with her problems. She also was gentle and kind and had a sense of humor that wasn't cutting. Another major thing that defined Barbara to others and to me was her enthusiasm. She didn't just do things as a knee-jerk. She loved art, she loved design, she loved languages, travel, fashion, and cultures with an undiminished excitement and enthusiasm. And that was not something that I grew up with. but it was something that made my life a joy. She was a special and unique person, and we were one. I'll love her deeply forever. Thanks to everybody for coming.
Mr. Chuck and Miss Barbara. Chuck and Barbara, Barbara and Chuck. Can't say one name without the other. They were deeply in love with one another. They still are. It should be that way in all marriages, but we know for a fact that it is not. They had a 50-year love affair. Although I think we will always think of Chuck and Barbara as one, Barbara's passing has left a terrible hole in the universe. And it is difficult on all of us here because knowing how much Barbara loved Chuck and how much Chuck loved Barbara, there are broken hearts among everybody in this room. Chuck and Barbara would have celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary on the 28th of December. It seems to me that Chuck and Barbara have set a marvelous example for all of us. It's the way a marriage should be. They lived life to the fullest, and they lived it on their terms. You've heard about the privacy of Barbara. That is one thing that was absolutely a constant. Renee and I and Neil and Mindy have known them for over 30 years. Barbara, always the kind person, but always the private person, and it was simply her wish to not burden anybody else. Their accomplishments separately and together are vast. You've heard a lot about Barbara. Chuck, obviously a gifted lawyer, a wonderful personal counselor, and I think that's something that in the legal profession is vitally important, to be a personal counselor. Chuck certainly has been that and has been a lawyer and a personal counselor to many of us, if not all of us in this room. This is how Neil and I met Chuck. Our company needed his expertise as a lawyer, and it was unbelievable how quickly that professional relationship turned into a personal relationship, and that's because of Chuck and Barbara. Barbara, certainly a scholarly art historian. She was an art dealer. One of the things that is tremendous is that she always viewed that her speaking and writing of French wasn't very good. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Barbara worked hard at that language each and every day. She was fluent speaker and writer of French, and she so enjoyed that language. And as important as all of these things are in both of their lives, the most important thing of all was that Barbara was a great lover of a man named Chuck. She absolutely adored him. She was always, and you've heard about this earlier, she's always too modest to talk about herself. She was too modest in thinking that she wasn't that good at French, although she was superb. She always took the road that it was somebody else's stage, not hers. That's part of that giving kindness that's a part of Barbara. It wasn't long after we started our lawyer-client relationship that Barbara was a bit puzzled. I used to come up to her and say, "Hi, Miss Barbara." She could not figure out exactly why I used the term Miss when I called her Miss Barbara. But when I explained to her that it was a Southern term of endearment, she then decided, I guess that's all right if Kelly calls me that. And I did, all of her life. On one of our first trips up here to visit Chuck and Barbara, Barbara certainly had an in at the Art Institute, and she was kind enough to get museum tickets for us to see something that Renee and I had only ever seen in books. We had the opportunity to stand in front of so many panels, I couldn't count them, to look at Monet's water lilies, panel after panel. The great likelihood is that Renee and I would have never seen that had it not been for the kindness of Barbara. It was during one of those visits, and there were many, to Chicago to see our dear friends, we got on the subject of Christmas. Of course, we knew Chuck and Barbara were Jewish, but Barbara took an interest in what did we do at Christmas time. We said, well, we get together with our family. And Renee said, Barbara, would you and Chuck ever come down and spend Christmas with us? And they said yes, they would. And they did for many, many years come down. We gathered our families together, and it started the great tradition of a formal Christmas dinner that Renee and I would put on for our family, which included Chuck and Barbara. Chuck and Barbara were certainly a part of our family. Renee's father, who is still living, lost his wife several years ago, and he feels a very strong empathy with Chuck. A very difficult time, and he wanted Chuck to know how much he was in his thoughts. When Chuck learned that Renee and I were baseball fans, he decided that we should get an opportunity to see one of the great stadiums and baseball teams of all times, his beloved Chicago Cubs in Wrigley Field. Now, you must understand, Chuck, although a sports fan, that wasn't exactly Barbara's cup of tea. She was so kind, she came to the baseball game at Wrigley Field. And there's a picture of her right here, with her head on Chuck's shoulder, and we're sitting at Wrigley Field. She enjoyed that experience not because she enjoyed baseball. She enjoyed seeing two of her new friends, Renee and me, enjoying a baseball game at Wrigley Field. We also got to see a few of the Chicago Bulls games. Now, I must tell you that since basketball is played as a winter sport, walking across the parking lot to get into the United Center was a tad bit on the cold side for a couple of Floridians like Neil and myself. We got to see Michael Jordan play, Scottie Pippen, and that crazy guy, Dennis Rodman. It was delightful, and Barbara was right there. Not because she was a basketball fan, because she was a Chuck fan. And if Chuck wanted to be somewhere, she wanted to be by his side. One of the most memorable trips that Renee and I will ever have in our lifetime came when Chuck and Barbara invited us to their 30th wedding anniversary in Paris. Renee and I had never been to Paris. Being able to be with them was like being with native Parisians. They knew everything about the city. Chuck was speaking French, Barbara was much better at it, and she was there to be with us and show us that magnificent city. That is absolutely a trip of a lifetime and a wonderful opportunity. At some point during our friendship, I asked how they came to be married on December 28th, wondering was it an important day in their family, to one or the other? And when that conversation started, Barbara sort of rolled her eyes. She let Chuck explain that the fact of the matter was that as year-end was approaching, Chuck was not going to miss the deduction of married filing jointly with the Internal Revenue Service. And as she rolled her eyes, Chuck said, "Never leave a deduction on the table." Barbara was the love of Chuck's life, and Chuck was the love of Barbara's life. They did simply everything together. Lots of long hours and hard work got them that apartment in Paris. A magnificent day. Both of them, wide-eyed, had a home in Paris. They used that home as a jumping-off point for many of their excursions around the world, especially in Europe. When somebody mentions to me world travelers, that's pretty simple. That's Chuck and Barbara. They truly traveled around the world, traveled to many places that I wouldn't go for any amount of money in the world. But they went, they enjoyed it, they enjoyed the people and learning about new cultures, new events. They were world travelers. Now the hardship for Chuck is made worse by that phenomenal love. It's the other side of the sword. When you have phenomenal love and respect, as Chuck has always had for Barbara, it becomes almost indescribable, the loss. But the real truth of the matter is simply this. Chuck wouldn't have had it any other way. Chuck would have never wanted to leave Barbara alone in this world as he is now. And for Barbara to have to bear that phenomenal sorrow that he now bears. All of his life, Chuck has done everything he could to love, to cherish, to shelter, and protect Barbara from harm. And he's been able to protect her this one last time by shouldering this phenomenal burden of Barbara's passing and being the one left behind. Chuck, you've honored every single vow that you made over 50 years ago to Miss Barbara. You have honored everything that you told her you would do. You stood by her side. Countless hours in this last year have been extremely, extremely difficult to you. But you did it. You did everything you promised you would do. It's well done. It's a life well done, and in this ending of Barbara's life, you're the one that is going to shoulder the burden and move on. And she thanks you so very much for being Chuck Levin. I love you, Chuck, and I loved your sweet wife, Barbara.
Think for a moment of a work of art that has touched your life. It could be a painting, a sculpture, it could be here in Chicago, it could be in any corner of the world. It could be very complicated and intense, show great skill and artistry. It could be very simple. When Chuck and I met to speak about Barbara, we shared our mutual admiration for one of the simplest and most profound works of art in the human experience. It was created tens of thousands of years ago on a cave in France, where an artist took a reed full of ink, put their hand on a wall, and blew. And what was left was the outline of a person. It says, "I was here. I left a picture of me as a work of art for posterity." They may not have known it would last that many years, or who would come to see it in centuries to come. But at the moment they were there, and they created something beautiful. That is the realm where Barbara lives now, in our memory, in our experiences of beauty. And what we hope for each other is to find peace, peace in the world, peace in our hearts. In Jewish life, when someone is gone, you wish peace upon them and peace upon those who remember them. On the back of your service folder, you will find a text of a humanistic adaptation of the traditional Kaddish. This Kaddish is often recited at times of memory and memorial, and this adapted humanistic version focuses not on a great name, but instead on the power of peace in our hearts, the peace we wish for Chuck and for Barbara's family and friends, and the peace that we find when contemplating beauty and a meaningful life. If you're comfortable standing, could I ask you to stand for just a moment? And today we'll recite the text first in Aramaic and then in English. You can join either or both as you are moved to do so. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shlomo ba'alma. Nivra Shlomo chirutana v'namlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru shalom. Yehei Shlomo Rabba mevorach le'olam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, yitpa'ar v'yitramam, v'yitnaseh v'yithadar, v'yitale v'yitalal, Shlomo ba'alma, brichu. Le'ele min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran ba'alma, v'imru shalom. Yehei Shlomo Rabba v'chaim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru shalom. In English, wonderful is peace in the world. Let us create a peaceful world, and let us establish its kingdom now and in the future. May peace come upon us to bless our lives. May we always continue to honor peace in the world, even though no praise can equal the importance of its reality. May peace and life prevail for us and for all Israel. Let us work to create peace here on earth for all people, and let us say, peace, shalom. Please be seated for just a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, the service here at the chapel is now concluded. Everyone's invited to Max and Benny's. That information is on the service folder following the entombment. Memorial contributions to the Alliance Française de Chicago. That information is also there. Sorry if I messed up the French. And for those of you who are joining us online, everything is on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please don't speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise, and you're invited to return to your cars as we prepare to go to the cemetery.